Did you know around 60% of 18 to 24-year-olds and 35 to 44-year-olds feel like they are unlikely to ever afford a house of their own? Today, the idea of being able to save enough to put down a deposit on a house feels like an unachievable mountain. Even just getting your first vehicle or getting into a better vehicle for those between 18 to 24 seems to average out to about that same 60% of men who are looking for another something that also costs quite a bit of money, where more specifically for the younger generation of 18 to 24-year-olds are just looking towards a means of getting around town with something that doesn't look like this. Because we all know the social standing for men, and statistically less for women, is that men value having something that gives them more than just the enjoyment of the experience of having a nice car and a nice house, but also plays a role in self-confidence, where 94% of men rate their self-confidence in direct alignment with the vehicle that they drive and the house that they live in. 34% of men in a study say that they put less importance on the where this nice house was located, and 54% more on the size and how aesthetically pleasing it is both for themselves and the social view of those closest to them. Yes, men value this measurement of size to self-confidence in more than one way. Then there were the 12% of the men in the study of 18 to 24-year-olds who just didn't seem to care about the house or the car. The study didn't specify why these particular people didn't seem to care about their social status as males, but I think it's safe to say that these are the guys living in the basement at the parents' house, playing video games and watching porn while daydreaming about one day getting the girl. In a world where everything happens now, where most of us know that the average cost of a house in 1965 was a fortune of $20,000. In 1985 was an average of $84,000. In 2005 was almost $250,000 at over $240,000. And now in 2023, coming up to another 20 years later, we're currently sitting at $543,000 of an average and rising. I think it's safe to say that by 2045, we could see the average cost of owning a home being pretty close to $1 million. Oh, that's going to be quite a hefty down payment. The thought of giving up or cutting back for a couple of years to try to save up for a house feels like a life sentence. And to make matters worse, there's no knowing whether at the end of a couple of years of cutting back to save up a down payment, that you'll actually have saved up enough to get a tiny home or even something on wheels, which is an option that many people have opted for in recent years due to the inflation, as you can clearly see by the inflation of van life and tiny home posts on social media. So for many people, simply trying to get a reliable vehicle that isn't more than 10 years old without going to debt, much less the thought of buying a home, leaves a lot of men thinking about running for the hills to build a cabin, thinking about building something like this in the woods to live off the land, but on an income that can only afford this. Naturally, for most men at any age, it's simply easier to hide from reality as long as possible and enjoy the money he has in ways he wants to spend it while daydreaming about someday getting the girl. So the 12% of the guys at home watching this in the basement are probably thinking, shit, I gotta get a job! Obviously, by the clearly rapidly rising cost of inflation, it's easy to see that the average 9-to-5 job that pays a minimum wage of $7.25, some states in the US federally require a $15 minimum wage, averaging $15,000 a year. And even with a college degree, for most college grads, an average of $55,000 a year, of which, with the cost of living, there just isn't enough to save up for a down payment when most people are just trying to afford groceries and pay back the student loans for that college degree. From Coursera, it's clear, Coursera, my bad. The cost of, I'm sorry, I biffed that I know it. From Coursera, let me know in the comments, how the hell do you say this? Did I say it right? I don't know. From Coursera, it's clear the cost of the college degree can cost about the same as a vehicle that's 10 years old or older, which has to be paid back at some point. So it's easy to see that even self-employed people who are running a small business that are making $84,000 a year is what most men are aiming for these days, to make their own hours and create their own income without running themselves into the ground to do it. When people come out of college with a business degree to get started with running a business, 78% of those college grads say they feel at a loss and don't have the connections needed to be able to collaborate or ask questions for guidance about simple things in their business, like where's the best place to go to hire employees, or what's the best social media to use for a specific business. This is why most men are more and more these days turning to online communities of other men who are also running their own business. But winning business is the goal, not taking risks of starting something that will cost them more than they can afford and end up failing. So where's a great community of like-minded business people that are getting training from someone who's successful, that gives the collaboration of a community to be able to ask questions, and business training that costs less than 1/3 of the average person's minimum wage and doesn't take over a year to complete the training in my spare time? Well, I'm glad you asked, because any 9-to-5 job these days just isn't enough to afford a home when you want this, but you can only afford this. And being your own boss is where it's at. So it doesn't seem to matter, honestly. If you're 18 or 45, every guy wants a treehouse. Even better if there's a man cave. So without further ado, I present to you John Assaraf. He's successfully started, created, and running 5 companies that make millions of dollars every single year. He's even teaching a course called Winning the Game of Business, where you can get on live calls with him and his team to answer your questions about your business, and even ask the online community in the group. As we clearly saw earlier, the cost of a house or even a vehicle, much less simply getting groceries, is becoming quite daunting. So get started today. And as always, don't forget to take time today to take care of you.